Mr. President, it has now been 59 days since the Senate and the House passed our budget resolutions. The American people are now expecting us to get together and do everything possible to bridge the partisan divide and come to a bipartisan deal. And on this side, Senate Democrats are ready to get to work. But unfortunately, despite their focus over the past 2 years on the need to return to regular order, Republicans have been refusing to allow us to move to a bipartisan budget conference. Now, many members, including the ranking member on the Budget Committee, Senator Sessions, had been very clear up until recently that after the Senate engages in an open and fair budget markup process, quote, and this is his words, the work of conferencing must begin. Minority Leader McConnell said in January that if the Senate budget is different than the House budget, then, and I quote, send it off to conference. That's how things used to work around here. We used to call it legislating, unquote. Mr. President, I couldn't agree more with Minority Leader McConnell's words from in January. But over the past few weeks, we have tried now to move to conference 8 times, and each time Senate Republicans have stood up and said no. They've managed to stall for weeks now, but their excuses for not wanting to move to conference are changing. At first, Republicans told us that we needed, to quote, a framework before they'd allow us to move to conference, though they never explained what that meant, and frankly, a budget is a framework. Then the story changed and they told us they would only let us move to conference if we made certain guarantees about the outcome. Then, last week, the story changed again, and Senate Republicans claimed that despite the fact that we engaged in a fair and open budget process here in the Senate less than 2 months ago, they think we need a do-over with another 50 hours of debate on top of the 50 we've already done, and another round of unlimited amendments on top of the unlimited amendments that were moved already. Mr. President, this is absurd. First of all, to claim that regular order involves a second full Senate budget debate is simply not true. The Senate has never been forced to go through a full debate and open amendment process twice just to get to conference. Not one case, completely unprecedented. In fact, every single time since 1994 that the Senate moved to conference, it was done by unanimous consent with bipartisan support, which is the way it ought to be done. Second of all, Mr. President, the Senate engaged in a full and open debate in which any member could offer a budget amendment they want to. We did that a few months ago. I know all of my colleagues remember this. I certainly remember this. I'd be happy to quote some of what was said about the process if any reminders are needed, because as that debate came to a close in the wee hours of the morning, Minority Leader McConnell said that the Senate had just engaged in, quote, an open and complete and full debate. And he continued and he said, and I quote, I know everyone is exhausted and people may not feel it at the moment, but this is one of the Senate's finest days in recent years, and I commend everyone who participated in this extraordinary debate, unquote. My ranking member, Senator Sessions, said the Budget Committee markup was, and I quote, an open process where everybody had the ability to offer amendments. And Senator Sessions said on the floor as the debate was wrapping up, he was thankful that the Republicans had, quote, free ability to speak and debate, and for helping us move a lot of amendments fairly and equitably tonight. So, Madam President, there is no question. The Senate engaged in a fair and open and lengthy debate about the budget before we passed it. And there's absolutely no good reason to ask that we do this all over again unless the intention is to simply stall the process and push us closer to a crisis. So, Madam President, instead of scrambling to find new excuses for their budget conference flip-flops, I hope that Senate Republicans realize that their opposition to bipartisan negotiations is not sustainable and allow us to get to the table to move on this. I know that there are members who do not agree with the budget that was passed. They will have another opportunity to fight for changes in a bipartisan conference, which is how we do this. That is the responsible and appropriate path forward, and I hope that the Senate Republican leaders decide to move back to the position they maintained just a few months ago. I know a number of our colleagues on the Republican side have said to me privately and in public that they believe that we should move to conference, and I hope that we can do that. The challenges before our country in terms of our debt and deficit and the investments that need to be made and the certainty that Americans are looking to us for cannot be completed until we go to conference, work out our differences, and come back and move this forward. Madam President, I hope that this time, when I ask for unanimous consent to go to conference, that Senate Republicans will join with us so that the American people can see an open conference, move to a debate, and solve this very challenging problem we have in front of us. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 33, H-Con Res 25, the amendment which is at the desk, the text of S-Con Res 8, the budget resolution that was passed by the Senate be inserted in lieu of thereof, that H-Con Res 25 as amended be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that the Senate insist on its amendment, request a conference with the House on the disagreeing votes of the two houses, and the chair be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the Senate, all with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Yes, Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, it's now been 59 days that the opposition is trying to orchestrate a backroom deal to raise the debt ceiling. Raising the debt ceiling is an incredibly important debate. Shouldn't be done in a back room by a few people. Shouldn't be done through parliamentary trickery or chicanery. It should be done full out in the open under the ordinary rules of the Senate. We are now borrowing $40,000 every second. $4 billion a day. We must borrow from China to run the ordinary functions of our government. In fact, it's worse. We borrow from China to send money to China. We borrow from China to send money to Pakistan. We build bridges in Pakistan with money borrowed from China. It can't go on. No American family can continue to spend money endlessly that they don't have. All we're asking for is a common sense resolution that says we can't keep borrowing. So what we're asking is, and what I ask is unanimous consent, that the senator modify her request so that it not be in order for the Senate to consider a conference report that includes reconciliation instructions to raise the debt limit. And I ask that as a unanimous consent order.
Madam President, I would reserve the right to object to the modification, and I will object in just a moment. And I would like to point out to my colleagues on this side of the aisle that for 4 years, we complained about the fact that the majority leader, who I see here on the floor, would refuse to bring a budget to the floor of the United States Senate. Then in what most of us believed was a proud moment, I thought it was a pretty tiring experience at my age of voting all night. Well, we approved or disapproved of 70 meaningless amendments, but the fact is we did a budget. And all of us patted each other on the back, and we were so proud that we did the budget. And by golly, now we'll move with the House of Representatives, and we will have a budget, hopefully at least begin negotiations with the House of Representatives, which is majority are Republicans, not Democrats, Republicans. So we would decide we were going to do that. But now we are going to, according to the objection that was just, and unanimous consent that was just asked for, in an unprecedented way, put restrictions on the conferees. Now, the way we usually do it is what I'm about to do, and that is we instruct the conferees. We instruct the conferees. We don't require the conferees, because that's why we appoint conferees, and that's why we approve or disapprove the result of that conference. That's how our laws are made. And that's how our budgets are made. So what do we keep doing? What do we on my side of the aisle keep doing? We don't want a budget unless we put requirements on the conferees that are absolutely out of line and unprecedented. So all I say to my colleagues is, can't we, after all those hours, I've forgotten what hour in the morning now it was, after all those votes, after all that debate, after all that discussion, and we came up with a budget, and now we won't go to conference. Why is that? So I'll object to to the modification that the senator from Kentucky just asked for in a moment. But I would first ask consent that the original request by the senator from Washington include two motions to instruct the conferees, one related to the debt limit and one related to taxes. That's the way we should do business in the United States Senate, is instructions to the conferees. Now, the senator from Washington may not like those instructions, but the fact is that those are the way we do business, not require the conferees to take certain measures. And so if my colleagues on this side of the aisle think that we are helping our cause as fiscal conservatives by blocking going to a conference on the budget, which every family in America has to be on because of certain requirements that they demand, then we are not helping ourselves with the American people at all. So I will object to the modification proposed by the senator from Kentucky. I would first ask consent that the original request by the senator from Washington include two motions to instruct the conferees, one related to the debt limit and one related to taxes.
Madam President,
Is there objection to the request for further modification?
reserving the right to object.
Senator from Kentucky. Yes.
Reserving the right to object, we're talking about two different issues here. We've passed budgets year in, year out. We continue to pass budgets. Of course, the budgets on our side don't raise taxes. The budgets on the other side raise taxes by $1 trillion. There are parliamentary rules for how we address separate issues, such as the debt ceiling. What we're concerned about, and all we're asking the opposition to do, including opposition within both parties to do, is that the debt ceiling vote be a separate vote, and that it not be stuck in the dead of night in a conference committee with very few people, selected by very few people. We have a big party on our side that can include people with many different opinions. Some who are very concerned about the debt ceiling and the direction of our country. Some who are concerned very much about the debt, so much so that our resilience will not flag. We will maintain the position that throwing our country into further debt is wrong for the country. I think most Americans can understand that. We're $16 trillion in debt. We're passing this debt on to our children. It's inexcusable. Somebody must make a stand, and several of us are making a stand, not against a budget, but is saying we cannot keep raising the debt ceiling. We cannot keep adding debt to our country. This burden is going to be passed on to our kids and our grandkids. We are making a stand here, and so I object to the modification.
Objection is heard. Is there objection to the original request?
I object.
Madam President.
Objection is heard. Senator from Maine.
Madam President, I just want to associate myself with the comments of the senator from Arizona. Now, it is accurate that no one on our side of the aisle supported the final budget. But the fact is, for the first time in years, a budget was brought to the Senate floor. Senator Murray presided over a very open process with debate, with plenty of opportunity for amendments to be offered. And there's simply no reason why the very reasonable approach suggested by Senator McCain that would allow us to go to conference should not be adopted. We have called repeatedly for a return to regular order in this body. Well, regular order is going to conference. Both the House and the Senate have passed budget resolutions, and it's important that there be a conference committee to work out the differences, which are considerable, so that we will have a framework with binding allocations for the appropriations committees. So
Just one question.
I would be happy to yield.
Isn't it true that the people that the conferees would be held with on the other side of the Capitol happened to be a majority of our party.
Well,
So we don't trust the majority party on the other side of the aisle to come to conference and not hold to the fiscal discipline that we want to see happen. Isn't that a little bit bizarre?
Madam President, it certainly is ironic at the least. It is an opportunity for the Republican House to argue for its budget. I voted against the final version of the Senate budget, but I think we should go to conference and try to work out an agreement. And the instructions suggested by the senator from Arizona are entirely reasonable. So let's get on with the process. Let's do what the American people expect us to do, and that is to negotiate a conference report that then would be brought back to both houses for consideration. And that is what I urge my colleagues to do. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President,
Mr. Leader, Majority Leader.
I, of course, admire and have for many years now the chairman of the Budget Committee. She is a renowned senator. She's very, very good at what she does. We're all very proud of her. But we've just heard something here somewhat unusual. We've heard my friend, the senator from Arizona, who he and I came here 30 some odd years ago to the Congress together, and another outstanding senator, Senator Collins from Maine, come up with a novel idea. It's kind of old-fashioned, but it's called regular order. What they're saying we should do is go to conference. And we have had in years past lots of motions to instruct. That's the way we used to do things around here. And to get off base on a debt ceiling matter has nothing to do with what we're doing, Madam President. Let's go to conference. Now, I don't know if we go to conference we can work anything out, but we're sure going to try. And that's what this is all about. And I can't imagine why after 2 months, we can't go to conference and work something out. The Republican leader has told me for a couple of years, to be honest, why don't we do our appropriation bills? We have here the former chair of the Appropriations Committee, who is now the ranking member on the Ag Committee. He knows as much as anyone here about financial matters. He's a man who is a humble man, doesn't talk a lot, but he knows that I don't want to speak for him, but I just think that everyone here who wants this institution to continue want us to do regular order. I've heard the hue and cry for quite some time from the other side, and I admire and appreciate very much the senator from Arizona instigating old-fashioned regular order, which we need to do in this body a lot.
Madam President,
Senator from Texas.
reserving the right to object, the issue before this body is not a budget. The issue before this body is not going to conference. The issue before this body is one thing in particular. It is the debt ceiling and whether the Senate will be able to raise the debt ceiling using a procedural backdoor that would allow only 51 votes. My friend from Nevada, my friend from Washington State, both of them could go to conference on the budget right now, today, if they would simply agree that this budget would not be used as a backdoor to use a procedural trick to raise the debt limit not on 60 votes, but on 50 votes. Now, I commend their candor because neither one of them is willing to make that representation, and that is commendable. But I would point out in the budget we debated, nothing in that budget raised the debt ceiling. And I would suggest, Madam President, that the American people are not interested in procedural games. I think they're tired of games by the Democrats and they're tired of games by the Republicans. What they are interested in is leadership in this body to address the enormous fiscal and economic challenges facing this country. Our national debt is nearly $17 trillion. It is larger than the size of our entire economy. The last 4 years, our economy has grown 0.9% a year. 23 million people are struggling to find jobs. This body should be debating every day, how do we get the economy moving? How do we get people back to work? How do we stop our unsustainable debt? But instead of doing that, just 2 weeks ago, we spent a week voting to add $23 billion in new taxes to small retailers online, creating an internet sales tax, going backwards, killing economic growth, killing jobs. This issue is very simple. Will the Senate allow a procedural backdoor to raise the debt ceiling and to do it while not fixing any of the problems? Now, my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle believe we should raise the debt ceiling with no conditions, with no changes, with no spending reforms, with no pro-growth reforms, with nothing to stop this unsustainable spending. The President has likewise said, raise the debt ceiling with no conditions. And that is why I would submit the Majority Leader is not willing to agree, no, this budget conference report will not be used to raise the debt ceiling, because it is precisely the hope to do so. Now, this body may well vote to raise the debt ceiling, but if this body votes to raise the debt ceiling, we should do so after fair and open debate where the issue is considered and where the threshold is the traditional 60-vote threshold, where we can address what I think is imperative, that we fix the problem. When I travel across the state of Texas, men and women stop me all the time and say, enough of the games. Go up there, roll up your sleeves, work with each other, and fix the problem. And just getting a new credit card, jacking up the debt ceiling with no spending reforms, no structural reforms, no pro-growth reforms is a mistake. It's the wrong path.
Yield for a question.
Here's the question. Here's the question.
Senator from California.
The people in my state are saying the same thing. Roll up your sleeves and attack the problems. Because guess what? I remember when this budget was balanced when Bill Clinton was president. It took literally a few months before George W. Bush gave a tax break and put it on the credit card, 2 wars on the credit card, and the debt was off and running. But, you know, put that aside. We are where we are. Don't you think, my friend, that if we could get into a conference, and I know a lot of us here have been in tough conferences, that's where you roll up your sleeve. I say Patty Murray and Paul Ryan are ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work. Why would you give instructions? I'd love to give instructions. I'd like to give instructions that the richest of Americans pay the same effective tax rate as the secretaries. I'd love to do that. I'd love to order that. I wouldn't do that. Let Patty Murray, Paul Ryan, the respective committees, get in there in an open process and come back here. Doesn't my friend understand that what he's calling for when he says roll up your sleeves and get to work is exactly what Senator Murray wants to do, Senator McCain, Senator Collins, and lots of us who believe we need to use regular order? Can my friend comment on that?
I thank my friend from California for that question. She may well be right that one of the reasons spending is out of control is that we no longer have Bill Clinton as president and a Republican Congress. Instead, we have President Obama, who has expanded spending more than any president in modern times. So that may well be part.
You skipped over George W. Bush,
that may well
caused the deficits, but let's not argue that.
I thank my friend from California, but I have been quite vocal that I believe both Democrats and Republicans have contributed to getting us in this mess. And we need leadership from both parties to turn it around. I would note that in the question that the senator from California raised, she did not say one word about not raising the debt ceiling using 51 votes. And everything else about this debate is all smoke. It's all about one thing, which is, do we give an unlimited credit card to the federal government to raise the debt ceiling, $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $5 trillion, $10 trillion? If the result of reconciliation was raising the debt ceiling $10 trillion,
would the senator yield for one more question, then I'll leave the floor.
I'm happy to yield as soon as I finish this point, and I'm very happy to yield at that point.
Thank you.
If we went to budget a conference committee and it came back on reconciliation to raise the debt ceiling by $10 trillion, then under reconciliation rules, 51 senators, only the Democrats, could vote to do so, and the Republicans would be utterly silenced from participating in anything there. Now, it may well be.
Do you expect that the House of Representatives, the Republican majority in the House of Representatives, would not participate in that vote?
What I expect is that each of us is obliged to carry out our responsibility to defend the interest of our state. I have 26 million Texans who I am not willing to go to and say, if they ask me, why did you go along with a procedural game to raise the debt ceiling, to allow Republicans in the Senate to be shut out, to give up any ability to force pro-growth reforms, to get jobs back, to get the economy back, to get people working? Why did you give up?
Madam President, would the senator yield for a question? Does the senator expect that he would not have a vote at the end of the day after a conference comes back to the House and Representatives?
We may well have a vote, but if we had a vote,
and
the
isn't
vote
that
would
the
be
democratic
the
process?
vote would be a 51 vote threshold, which would mean my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle have been very explicit that in their collective judgment, the debt ceiling should be raised with no conditions.
Well, Mr. President,
now, given
if
that,
you would yield for a question, does the senator from Texas understand that the House of Representatives also would have to pass this? They are a Republican majority. And by the way, Madam President, we are not talking about whether or not we should pay our bills that we have already obliged in this country. We are talking about putting a budget framework forward for the next 10 years. We had a terrific debate about that. The senator from Texas participated in that, offered amendments, had an opportunity to do that. The House of Representatives did the exact same thing. At the end of the day, the way a legislative democratic process works is the two bodies come together, and it will have to pass whatever our conference agrees with a majority of Republicans in the House and a majority in the Senate with Democrats. And that is going to be where the senator from Texas will have an opportunity to say yes or no to a conference. So I don't understand the senator saying he would not participate. You have a vote. That's how the Senate works.
I appreciate my friends from Washington's effort to defend the prerogatives of the Republican House. What I would suggest is that each of us have a responsibility to our states.
With your vote.
With our vote, but also to defend the ability to have our vote matter, to have it make a difference, because if this procedural trick is allowed to go forward, what it would mean, this fight right now is the fight over the debt ceiling. Because what it would mean if we go to a conference committee that as sure as night follows day, we would find ourselves in a month or two with a debt ceiling increase coming back and the Democrats in this body voting to raise the debt ceiling with no conditions whatsoever, which is what the president has asked for.
For a question, I thank you so much. Listen, let's cut through what's happening and tell me where I'm wrong, and I really would respect your answer. He represents a lot of folks. I represent 38 million, so we're two big states and we owe a lot to our people. That's for sure. What's happening here today is very clear. The Republicans, except for Senator McCain and Senator Collins, who were here, are stopping us, this nation, from having a budget. And they're saying their reason is something might happen in the conference. Well, that is not the way we work in a democracy. Anything can happen any moment. Let's get into that conference. Paul Ryan has a budget that I think is apocalyptic that you may well support. Patty Murray has a budget that you probably think is apocalyptic. They're going to get into that conference and they're going to work together. That's called democracy. And I'll close with this and ask my friend to respond. Ronald Reagan supported raising the debt ceiling about 18 times. He put out a number of statements that are totally counter to my friend. Ronald Reagan said, and I paraphrase, and I'll get the exact quote to you and put it in the record as I've done in the past. He said, even thinking about defaulting on the government's bills is enough to send shockwaves through the country. The last time you guys played that game, it cost us $19 billion. We cannot afford you. You say you're conservatives, but you're leading us down that road. I beg you to think about what you're doing. I beg you to have faith and trust in this democracy. I beg you to let the people who are very responsible in the House and the Senate, who are on different wavelengths when it comes to this budget, let them get to the work. And to quote my friend, let them get to the place where they can roll up their sleeves and get the job done. I think by your continuing presence to stop us from having a budget, you are doing a great disservice not only to this country, but to your party. That's an opinion.
Question?
I'm happy to yield.
Senator from Kentucky.
This is a debate, and it's a good debate. It's a debate about the debt ceiling. I'm actually in favor of allowing the debt ceiling to go up under certain conditions where we reform things. I think it's unconscionable not to do anything, just say, oh, here's a blank check, keep doing what you've been doing. We're running the country into the ground. We're borrowing $40,000 a second. Should we not try to reform the process? Many of us supported last time around raising the debt ceiling in exchange for a balanced budget amendment. 75 to 80% of the public thinks we should balance our budget. You have to. Why shouldn't we? I would ask the senator, are you not hearing from your people at home that the debt ceiling should not be done in secret, that it should be done, and if it's going to be done, it should be attached to significant budgetary reform?
Thank my friend from Kentucky, and that is exactly what I'm hearing from men and women throughout Texas. And I would note that the senator from California, the senator from Washington, I respect the sincerity of their beliefs, that they genuinely believe the Democratic budget passed by this House is the proper course for this country, that the proper course is to raise taxes yet another $1 trillion on top of the $1.7 trillion that taxes have already increased. They genuinely believe that the proper course is never to balance the budget and allow massive deficits to extend in perpetuity. I respect the sincerity of their views, but at the same time, I believe that those views are inconsistent with the best interest of this country, that the best interest of this country are to restore economic growth, are to get back to historic levels of growth that allow small businesses to thrive, and in particular, allow the most vulnerable among us to work to achieve the American dream. The people who have been hurt the most in the last 4 years, under President Obama, we've had 4 consecutive years of less than 1% average growth of the economy. I refer to this period as the Great Stagnation. The people who have been hurt the most during the Great Stagnation have been young people, have been Hispanics, have been African Americans, have been single moms. Right now, if you look at unemployment, unemployment for those without a high school degree is over 11%. For Hispanics, it's nearly 10%. For African Americans, it's nearly 14%. For young people, it is over 25%. When this country has massive spending, massive debt, massive regulation, and massive taxes, the result is that small businesses are strangled and die, and the people that lose their jobs are the single moms that are struggling to provide for their kids at home, like the so many moms right now that are seeing their hours forcibly reduced to 29 hours a week because of the burdens of Obamacare. And I believe we have an obligation to the American people to focus every day on turning the economy around, on getting jobs back, and stopping our unsustainable debt. Now, my friend from California made reference to the prospect of a default. I absolutely agree. The United States should never, ever, ever default on its debt. And that is the reason why I strongly support the legislation introduced by the senator from Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, the Default Prevention Act, which says in the event that the debt ceiling is not raised, that the United States will always pay its debts, pay the interest on its debts, so we never default. And I would note that my friends on the other side of the aisle right now could join together and taking default off the table entirely. And I'm happy to yield for a question while retaining the floor.
If I could ask the senator to yield for one final question from my side, and I know they want to keep talking, but I just would.
I'm happy to yield to the senator from Washington.
The irony of this, to me, is really astounding. By objecting to us to go to conference, the Senate Republicans who are objecting are actually putting us right in the position of being in the place where the debt ceiling may well be part of a budget conference, because the House of Representatives wants to appoint conferees and have a budget done fairly quickly once they appoint conferees, because they have told us they don't want to go through a series of votes, as we all did. I think it's 20 days. So if you object to go to conference at this point,
5:30 having arrived.
I would ask for one additional minute. That
Is there objection?
by objecting to go to conference right now, what the Senate Republicans who are objecting are doing is pushing us to a place where the debt limit will, by virtue of timing, have to be a part of it. May be a part of the
having
discussion.
arrived.
I would ask the senators to think about what they are doing by their objection in forcing us into that position, and suggest that by allowing us to go to conference now, they
5:30 having arrived.
have a better chance of not going.